Welcome to this week's episode of Biz Success in 15, where top experts share hot tips and strategies that you can implement in as little as 15 minutes to build your dream business. And now here's your host, the Visibility Wiz, Cindy J.
Hi, I'm Cindy J, the Visibility Wiz, and welcome to this episode of Biz Success in 15, where top experts share hot tips and strategies that you can implement in 15 minutes or less. Today, our guest is Ellen Finklestein, and she teaches online entrepreneurs to create a flourishing online business with an emphasis on internet technology and marketing strategy. Ellen has created and delivered hundreds of webinars and is passionate about the value of webinars for reaching the world, having a greater impact, and earning a living. For that reason, she trains entrepreneurs to plan, design, and deliver profitable presentations and webinars. Welcome, Ellen. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes, and to begin with, can you describe a personal or business challenge that you had to overcome to achieve your level of success?
Well, I think for me, it was the fact that when I started, my kids were young. They're now 29 and 31, so they're not young anymore.
Right.
Because of that, and there were two reasons. But the main thing was that traveling was off the table for the most part. So one of the reasons was that I had two young children at home. And the second reason was that I live in a small, isolated college town of 10,000 people in southeast Iowa. It's surrounded by corn and soybean fields. So it's not only an hour and a half hours away from the nearest airport, but it's 4.5 hours drive from the nearest big city, like
right.
Minneapolis one way, Chicago, going down St. Louis and going to the right Omaha, 4.5 hours from all. Mm-hmm. So basically the point is that I had to figure out ways to reach people online. And I did that by doing webinars. So
very, very good.
I couldn't, there was very little that I could do locally.
Right. And I understand that 100%. I know you and I have talked about that before. I was sort of in the same boat.
Right.
Yes. And that's so important because there's so many people out there that are in the middle of nowhere wondering, how can I be online? How can I get visible?
Right. Absolutely.
I know that you teach webinars, and that's the greatest thing. So whenever somebody's thinking about a webinar, what are some of the things that they need to consider?
Well, a webinar, in fact, I'm just working on a new course about email marketing and your free offer. And one of the things that people don't realize is that a webinar is just, if you're going to sell something, is basically just a kind of free offer. So if you have a little ebook or a worksheet and some kind of PDF or a free video that you have and that people opt in to get, a webinar is somewhat similar to that, although the path to selling is a little bit more direct.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the cool things about webinars is that everybody who signs up for the webinar ends up on your list, and you do need to be transparent about that, especially after GDPR.
Right.
And not everybody is, but you should be very clear about that when you sign people up. So it's a way of finding your ideal market, your ideal customer, because you advertise the title of the webinar, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And so people who are interested in it sign up. So that's similar to your free offer. You have a catchy title and people who are interested in it opt in.
Mm-hmm. And so how do they even prepare their webinar? What are some of the planning stages?
Yes. So I actually have a form somewhere about planning for a webinar, but there are lots of steps. And I think one of the things that is daunting is that it's a project. Definitely it's an event, like any event. So, planning a live event, it's a lot of steps. Planning a webinar is probably a little bit easier. There's no real live venue, but you have to, first of all, figure out what your topic is going to be. And you should start by doing that like you would do any free offer, or about maybe doing some kind of survey, finding out what people want. So you have to have the right topic, and it has to sound good. And then there's the technical side of it. So there's a platform. We're using Zoom. I use Zoom webinar all the time for my webinars. I love it. And so that's, the technical side of it. So there are two ways to do webinars, and you need to decide which serves you best. One is to do live speaking like we're doing now. People don't always think of that as a webinar, but it is, as long as it's live. But you can also do slides if you want. So if you're going to do slides, that's a project that you have to do, is to create the slides. And the more kind of information, kind of more technical information, more specifics you need, the more likely it is, I think, that you would use slides so that people can kind of copy things down and write things down. And then a webinar is basically a funnel, like any other funnel. So again, like you have an opt-in, your regular opt-in, and that leads to autoresponders, and it leads to people being on your list, and you promote things to them. And in the same way, a webinar should not be a sole thing. So you have to plan your whole funnel. What are you going to sell? And of course, what are you going to say? There's a whole script that you have to write. And then how will you follow up? And there's a lot of follow-up that needs to be done in terms of, first of all, reminding people to get on the webinar, and then people who signed up but didn't show up, reminding them to watch the recording, and that kind of follow-up. So all of it is, none of it's unique for somebody who has an online business, but it's just slightly different. There's still that whole funnel, and I think people sometimes don't realize that it has to be part of that for it to be successful.
Right. And I know years ago, a lot of people would just go on there and they would do live Q&A webinars. So what are the pros and cons of just having it be a free for all, if there are any pros in your opinion?
I don't think I would just do a Q&A unless it was really focused on a specific type of very narrow topic that people really wanted to know about. So I mentioned GDPR, the new law from the European Union. So because people have so many questions about that, I suppose you could get on and say, I've just implemented GDPR for my website, and I learned an awful lot. If you have questions about it, I'm just going to get on and do a Q&A about that, because it's so specific and technical and people have a lot of questions about it. But in most cases, I would say the only time you would do that would be as part of a membership program, or to people as an add-on to some other thing, where you might have, for example, you might have taught a course, and then you might say, do you have questions about anything I said in the course? I'll get on live and do this for you, or something like that. But in general, as I said, I think it needs to be more focused and more specific to attract people who want to hear about a specific topic.
Right. So what are different types of call to actions people can utilize at the end of their webinars?
I actually think if somebody has never done a webinar, that it's a great idea to do a non-selling webinar. I've discovered that attracts people. So you can say, this is a no-selling webinar. People go, ooh. So it's a great way to grow your list that way. I did this recently as a joint webinar with somebody, and we both we made it really clear that they would get on both our lists, so we both grew our lists that way. We both So you can, and it's a great way to start because all the pressure is off of you if you've never done one, and you still grow your list. There's a great value to it. Anytime you do a webinar, you're showing your expertise. So it's a really, really valuable type of thing to do. So if you are going to sell something, obviously you have to have the sales page, all of that ready, and that product should have its own funnel. And you give people some specific information in advance, which is basically why this is important. So when people say, 3 secrets of such and such is such a common type of thing, or, 3 mistakes, these are very common titles for webinars. But basically what you're doing is you're giving people some concrete information that they can use right away. That's usually the promise of a free webinar. But you're also, one of those points has to be why this is so important. So for example, when I do a webinar about webinars, I try to convince people that webinars are such an ideal way for people to expand their reach, reach more people, have more impact, and to grow their income, as opposed to speaking online, as opposed to speaking in front of a live audience, which is, it's harder to get that many people, and you have to travel, and the audience has to travel, and it's just so much harder. And so I talk about how unique it is and how people have been speaking for thousands of years, but the ability to speak to people all around the world now is just a kind of technological game changer that I think is historic.
So on these no-selling webinars, what are your call to actions?
There would always be a freebie. There would always be something, and you can, because you have had them opt in order to get to the webinar, they might not even need to opt in there. So you're just putting them in a funnel, but you want them to download something definitely and to get to know you better. You want to, But remember, webinars are a wonderful way for people to get to know you. And in fact, one of the reasons I love Zoom is because I always start and end the webinar what we're doing now with live video, as opposed to sharing my slides. People can see you, and that's the value of live video. We all know that. It's so powerful. So people get to know, like, and trust you much better than if they just hear you and see your slides.
Yeah. And so real briefly, can you explain, in case any of our listeners aren't quite for sure, what a funnel is?
Sure. So a funnel is a process that you want people to go through, and they start with something free, whether it's a webinar or your free download, and then they get on your list, and at some point you want people to buy something. That's always the reason for growing your list or interacting with people in any way for speaking, is eventually you want people to buy something from you. And so a funnel automates this to some extent so that you don't have to deal with individual people. You can speak one to many, so to speak, to many people. And then you set up a series of autoresponders, which are emails that happen automatically, that introduce people to what you're all about, give people more information, and eventually make an offer. And so that's the funnel. And you can have various levels of funnel. You can have various levels in your funnel. So you start with something free, and at the end you might have a very expensive product, and you might not get to that right away. That might come in broadcast emails that you send, several times a year. You might promote your high level coaching or something like that. But everybody should know what the funnel is of their business, and you should diagram it out. Because what I see a lot is people giving out a lot of information but not leading people anywhere. So like I have a coaching client, and we recently did this, and they were he had no autoresponders at all when people went onto his list. And so he was just leaving people hanging kind of, and not really benefiting from these people who came onto his list because they were excited about what he had to offer.
Exactly. Thank you very much. And going back to webinars, so you've got your webinar planned, you know how it fits into your funnel, you know if it's going to be a selling or a non-selling webinar, etc. So now you need to, how do you even get enough people to attend your webinar? Now, a lot of people say, yeah, I tried to do a webinar, but only one person showed up, or two people. So how do you get people to attend them?
So you can't do it yourself. Webinars are traditionally done when they're successful with a partner, because you can offer a webinar once to your list, and the people who are interested attend, and that's it. Then you can't really do it again for another few months at any rate. So if you want to be doing webinars regularly, you have to be partnering with other people. And so this is a JV partnership if you're selling something. And even if you're not, you should have an affiliate program in place, and you share that, you give the people who promote you an affiliate link. And the reason people might be willing to promote you, even if it's a non-selling webinar, is that you have a funnel, and eventually you do lead people to buy, and that affiliate link will be kept. However your affiliate program works, whether it's with a cookie or a database type of system, hopefully the affiliate will get credit for sales later on. And so people do that for that reason. There are people who make a lot of money just with affiliate marketing, and they're promoting people who are promoting a product in whatever way. And one of the ways of doing that is through a webinar. And so it's possible, if you have the right people, it's possible to have amazing things. So I guess the best result I ever got was 800 people in a week from 2 affiliates. It was 2 separate, each one of them had their own webinar. And one of them brought me 500 people and the other one brought me 300 people. And, that's possible if if you're promoting the right people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you have the right people promoting you, the other way around.
Right. And so how do you even go about finding these people, and how do you approach them? Are you both teaching the same subject, or is it more like an interview type style? How do you do these type of webinars with partners?
Usually it's not a webinar type, it's not an interview type of thing. So usually the person will, if somebody is promoting a webinar of mine, I'm just doing a presentation, a fairly straight presentation. If it's a one-on-one, I have one affiliate for that webinar, it works best if that person comes on and introduces me and says, hey, everybody on my list, all my subscribers, I'm so excited to have, Ellen Finklestein here or Cindy Holbrook here. And then that person introduces me, let's say, and then I go on and speak. And the person will be there. And then the person might jump in at the end and say what they thought about the webinar and what they think about the product. And they might add a bonus as well. This is a very effective technique for affiliate marketing, is for the affiliate to add a bonus, not only with webinars, with any affiliate marketing. So that's one way of doing it. Now, if you're doing a big launch and you have lots of affiliates promoting you, then they don't necessarily come on. You provide them with email copy and they send out emails to drive people to your webinar.
Okay. Thank you very much for clarifying that. And And so, you've gotten your partners, you've chosen to do it yourself, you're done with the webinar, and you should have put them in some sort of funnel. But now that the webinar is over, now what? Do you do anything with the webinar? What does the person do?
Well, it should always be recorded because, remember, not everybody shows up. And there are things you can do to increase the number of people who show up, but there will always be people who won't show up. So you take the recording, and you can do several things with it. I usually put it at the top of the sales page. So then after the webinar, I promote it to the people who registered, and it's just right there at the top of the sales page, so they don't have to go anywhere. They go and they see the recording, and then the sales page is there, and they can buy right away. So that's usually how I do it. I like to edit my webinars. I'm kind of picky about it, so it usually takes me, till the next day to do it. But, that's something you can do. What's cool about webinar recordings is that you can turn them into an evergreen webinar, into a whole evergreen funnel. So you can just take that recording and put it at the top of a page. You can put it's called gating it, but you can put an opt-in form in front of it. People opt in, they hear the free webinar, and then the sales page is right there. And there's some tricks you can do, like making the button appear at the end or something like that. You don't necessarily have to do anything like that. But once you have it there, if you think it's worth it, then you can just drive traffic to the recording over and over again. Yep.
And you said there's other strategies to get people into the webinar. So what are some of the other ones besides using partners?
Well, what I was talking about there was getting people to actually attend the live webinar. And the reason for that is because people are much more likely to buy if they attend the live webinar, because they're in the moment. It's an event. It's kind of exciting. And when they watch the recording, they're less likely to buy. So one of the things that you can do is to create a little video on the page. When people opt into the webinar, after that, they go to another page that either tells them to look for their email or actually gives them the login information for the webinar. So either they get it either on a page or an email or both. So you can put a welcome video there. So people get to know you in the video format in advance, and that's more likely to create a connection and more likely to attend. You should definitely put a link for people to put it on their calendar. So there are these little technical things, and you can just, I think there's more than one way of doing this, but you can just search online for create calendar links. Mm-hmm. And then there are websites, and then you put in the information, and then you get these buttons, and then people just click and it adds it to their calendar, whichever calendar they have. So that helps remind people. And you want to remind people the day before, an hour before, maybe even a few minutes before. There are some advanced things. I've never done this, but if you have a text message service, you can ask people to put in their cell phone number and send them a text message just beforehand. So all of these different types of things you could do. In terms of getting other people on it, for the first time, I just found out that that Facebook actually has a page to create a share button that shares not the page they're on, but the opt-in page, another page. You put in another URL. So on the page, I call it the thank you page, the page that they get to after they opt in, you can put some code that that Facebook gives you, and it creates this kind of tiny little button, but it's a button. And then when people click it, it sends them, they share it on Facebook, and it has the link to the opt-in form. So you can get other people to share it for you. Okay. So, yeah. So besides partners, I mean, obviously you can promote it with email, you can promote it on social media, you can promote it especially in groups. I think Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups are good places to share your webinar. But definitely that's part of having a webinar, doing a webinar is having a promotional plan. You really need to plan that out, and you shouldn't be kind of scrambling at the last minute.
And in your webinar, why are templates important? Can you share just a couple of do's and don'ts for templates?
For the slides, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think everybody knows what death by PowerPoint is. And it's really creates an experience that's boring if the person has all of the text on the slide with simple bullet points and reads it. And what happens, I mean, there's some scientific things about why this doesn't work. People can't listen and read at the same time. But basically, people just get bored and they tune out, and you don't want that. So you want highly visible slides, visual slides. So big pictures, not a lot of text. Most of what you say should not be on the slides. And one of the things about this that I think is so great about webinars is that when you're speaking in front of an audience, you don't want to be reading. But on a webinar, you can have your script in front of you or up on your screen, that kind of thing. And so you don't want to sound like you're reading, but it's really helpful for people who are not good speakers and who are uncomfortable in front of an audience and who are introverts. Webinars are a really great way to speak because you can have the script there. But the slides should be real. The slides should require people to look at them to understand the point so that they have to pay attention. And so I do have some templates that help people design really highly visual slides.
Okay. And can you share a strategy that our listeners can implement in 15 minutes or less to grow their business?
Sure. So we talked about partnering, and I think partnering is really essential for a successful business. After all, you and I are partnering right now. We're working with each other, and when you interview people, whatever it is, but certainly with webinars. So guest blog posts, recommending each other's free gifts. There's just so many ways to partner, and it's such an important skill to have. So my thing about doing something in 15 minutes a day is just insert this little intention in your mind that you're always looking for partners. So when you meet somebody online, are you interested in partnering? Or how could we work together? Just ask those little questions and set up partnering meetings with people. You should have an appointment calendar like Time Trade or whatever. There are lots of them. So you can quickly and easily set up meetings with people without emailing back and forth. And then I love Zoom for this also because you get to know people, you can see them.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's much better than just a phone call. So just have this little intention that when you meet people online, ask them if they're interested in partnering or how we could work together.
Very good. And Ellen, I know that you have a wonderful gift for our community. So can you share what it is?
Sure. So I have these you talked about templates. I have these templates that help speakers create bright, clear, highly visual slides with not a lot of text. Some of them are just a title and an image, and some of them have a few points on them. And I'd love to share them with you. And all it is a few sample slides. But you can take those slides, change the image, change the text, and you have a really interesting, clear, bright slide that won't bore people.
Very good. Yes. So you want to head on over to bizsuccessin15.com/EF for Ellen Finklestein. So it's EF lowercase, bizsuccessin15.com/EF, and grab your PowerPoint layout templates. And this way you can go do your webinar and have some awesome templates that are going to wow the crowd. You'll also be able to re-listen to Ellen's words of wisdom and download this episode. And Ellen, do you have any parting words for our listeners?
Go out and speak to the world.
I like that. Go out and speak to the world. Thank you very much. And thank you for being my guest today, Ellen. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yep, you're a great interviewer, so I enjoyed it very much.
Well, thank you. And for our listeners, if you enjoyed today's show, feel free to share it with your friends so everybody can go out there and start rocking your webinar. And if you have a potential partner in mind, you want somebody, you can say, hey, go watch this podcast with Cindy and Ellen, and then we can create this awesome webinar together and partner up. So there's, think out the box a little bit. You want to hop on over to bizsuccessin15.com/EF, and you're going to find all links mentioned on today's show. You'll be able to download today's show, re-listen to it at your convenience. You can also catch up on past episodes that you might have missed. And while you're there, be sure to grab your free gift from Ellen, the PowerPoint layout templates. Big hugs. And have a great week. And be sure to tune in next week for another great episode of Biz Success in 15. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Biz Success in 15. For all links mentioned in today's show and to watch or listen to previous episodes, visit bizsuccessin15.com. Thanks so much for listening, and be sure to tune in next week for another amazing guest.